Trina, and this is my reading wrap-up for November. This month I had these 5 books on my TBR list, and I did read all 5 of them this month. Yay! I read 6 books in total in November, so those 5 plus another one. So into my reviews for the books I read in November. As always, I am starting at my lowest rated book and working my way up to my favorite books of the month. And this month I did have a doozy of a 1-star book. And unfortunately that book was one I was really looking forward to. It was Replica by Lauren Oliver. This is a young adult science fiction novel, and I don't want to say too much about what the sci-fi element is because I was kind of unsure of it going in. Like, I had a suspicion, but wondering if it was right was part of the appeal to me. So I don't want to tell you too much about it. I want to talk about the representation issue that I had, and then I want to talk about the format and whether or not I thought it worked, and lastly I'll talk about my thoughts on the plot. I've been looking forward to this book for over a year. It came out last year. I was very excited about it then, and I just didn't get to it in time because I procrastinate on anticipated releases a lot of the time. So by the time I got to this book, I was still very curious in it, and it just let me down from chapter 1. And the big issue that I had with this book was the amount of body shaming that happened in it. There is a lot of fat shaming and also some thin shaming. It was offensive and it was never challenged. If you want to know specific quotes from the book, you can go to my Goodreads account and find my review of this one. I will link it down below just so that's easier to find. And when I did all of my individual page reading status updates, I pulled quotes word for word from this book and then talked about why I didn't like them. There are a lot of negative stereotypes used, and I just think that all it does in a case like this is it just serves to ingrain those negative stereotypes in the minds of readers. And a lot of people did try to defend it and say, well, that's just how the character thinks about herself. And hey, that is totally fair. If a character internalizes some kind of negative connotation or stereotype about themselves, I've been there. I do that myself too. I think all of us do it to some extent. But I had an issue with it because these things that I pointed out and the things that I was offended by were not internal thoughts of the character. They were all coming from a third-person narrative. And there's a huge difference to me in saying Gemma felt like a hippopotamus versus Gemma was a hippopotamus. Like, do you see the difference there? You can feel like a thing, or you can just be told you are a thing. And the book was telling us she was as fat as a tree trunk, as fat as a hippopotamus, as fat as a parade balloon. Now, I'm not saying that everyone is going to be offended by the same things that I am. Certainly, we aren't. I'm not telling you you have to feel the same way. I'm not telling you you can't read this book. I'm just telling you this is a thing that went into why I gave it a low rating. Now, as for the format of the book, you can read the first half of the book and you will get Lyra's story. Flip it over, and the second half is Gemma's story. You can read this in any order. You can read all of Gemma's and then all of Lyra's, or you could start with Lyra's, or you can alternate each girl chapter by chapter. It will line up that way. But I used the reading order found on prettygeekery.com, and I'll put a link directly to that reading order down below if you guys are wanting to read this and want to use it, because I do think that that reading order flowed really, really well. As for the format itself, I don't think it was necessary. I don't think it did the book any favors. I think it was just kind of a marketing gimmick. Both characters' points of views are told in third person. We are not getting like their internal thoughts. Their perspectives aren't incredibly different when they're encountering like the same scenes and dialogue and whatever. So to me it was kind of pointless. There was no reason why this book couldn't have just been written chronologically, and that way it would have cut out some of the backtracking that we kept having to do every time you would flip. And it would also cut out some of the repetitiveness. Like, there were 2 or 3 scenes where the girls are together and like the exact same dialogue and stuff happens, and you just don't get enough extra to justify reading those scenes twice, in my opinion. So I did not like the representation, I did not like the format, I don't think it suited the story, and the third thing I did not like was the plot. For about 2 or 3 chapters, I was very intrigued by the plot. Like Lyra's first couple of chapters, when I finally got to know like this is really what's going on, I've been wondering what this book was really about, I was here for it, and it did deliver, and then like the plot just kind of fizzled out. I didn't like the plot, I didn't like the characters, I really didn't like the romances, they were just so contrived. And I think a big part of it is because I did have, you know, large expectations for this book. I wanted to like it, I was interested in it, and it just kind of let me down. So I think because I expected so much from it, it let me down even further plot-wise, so I didn't like the story and how it unfolded and everything. So I'm not going to be continuing this series. I personally wouldn't recommend it, but I'm also not going to ever tell anyone you can't read a book. If you do want to read it, definitely check out that reading order I mentioned, because I think that that is probably the best order to go about things. Next, I read Turtles All the Way Down by John Green, which I gave 3.5 stars. This is his latest YA contemporary story, and there's not much of a plot here. This is very much a character-centric book, so I just want to tell you guys that it is an own voices representation of obsessive-compulsive disorder, OCD. I don't have OCD, so I don't want to talk a whole lot about the representation in this book, but I do have an anxiety disorder, and OCD does fall under the umbrella of anxiety disorders, so many moments in this book were very relatable to me as well. Aside from the main character, I don't think the other characters were memorable. I don't think that they were super well developed or anything. The romance wasn't quite as awkward or angsty as most YA romances. I did appreciate that. I did also appreciate the way that the main character reflected on and thought about her friendship with her best friend. I don't think it was the best friendship, but I just enjoyed the conversations that it kind of brought up about it. It was overall a good book. I enjoyed it more than I disliked it, but when I left this book as soon as I was done, I just knew that it wasn't going to stick with me very long. There's not a lot here to grab onto aside from, I think, the representation. It's a very character-centric book, and I think if you love character-centric books, this one was probably going to be, you know, a great fit for you, but I keep just finding about myself, I like a little bit more plot than was in this one, so it didn't quite like feel like a rounded out full story to me, and there's nothing wrong with that. This is just a personal preference thing. So overall I did like it, but I don't think it's going to really stick with me. Next, I read Follow Me by Sara Shepard, which is the second book in her Amateurs trilogy. This is a young adult thriller series, and in the first book it is set up where we're following a group of 4 or 5 different characters that have met online on a website that is dedicated to unsolved true crimes. In the first book, these characters come together to investigate a disappearance of a really pretty popular high school girl that had happened 5 years previously, and in the first book that mystery is wrapped up. But there is a story thread that does carry over into book 2, and I am assuming it will also carry over into book 3. Book 2, for the most part, though, does follow a brand new mystery. Another girl has gone missing. She's a social media star. Now, the interesting thing in the structure of this book to me is that the reader and the main characters, the sleuths, the amateurs, we know who the suspect is, and they are sending notes to the amateurs gang that are basically like clues of how to follow him and find him. So the main question in this is, can they find him in time before something else really bad happens? So if you don't like books set up like that, where you kind of know who the main suspect is from the start, I can understand why you might think this isn't suspenseful enough. But I think if you liked her Pretty Little Liars series, you wanted to see characters who were much more capable of solving mysteries and crimes, and you really liked A and wanted to see kind of a behind the scenes of A and what they were up to, I think that this book in the series, at least the second one, would appeal to you. So I still would recommend it for that. So I gave it 4 stars. It did lack a little bit of suspense for me, but I mean overall it met my expectations for a Sara Shepard book, for an Amateurs book. I wasn't unhappy with it at all, so I did enjoy this one. Another YA thriller that I read this month was There's Someone Inside Your House by Stephanie Perkins. This one is about a small town where some of the high school students are being murdered. I gave this book 4 stars, and I feel like that is a highly unpopular opinion because I've heard nothing but bad reviews of this book. The main things that I saw people saying that they did not like was they did not like that the killer was revealed so early. That killed the suspense for them. Totally fair. If you don't like that, I can see why you wouldn't like this book. They also didn't like that it was a cheesy slasher. They didn't like that there was a big romance in it, and to me, I didn't think that the romance took front seat. I expected there to be a romance in the book because like the synopsis on Goodreads like leads out with love is hard or love is killer or something like that. So it's like, okay, I know there's gonna be a love story in it. I also totally expected this to be a cheesy thriller slasher in the vein of Scream or something, like kind of a parody, kind of cheesy. I just expected it to be a romantic cheesy slasher, and that's exactly what this book was, and that's what I wanted from it, so it delivered upon my expectations. I could have used a little bit more creepiness. There is a lot of gore in it. I don't think it's the worst gore I've ever read, there just happens to be a lot of it. The main character is biracial. She is African American and Native Hawaiian. Her grandmother is African American, one of her best friends is trans, and I do want to note here that there was an issue with the trans rep in this book. Early readers of the ARC copy alerted Stephanie Perkins that she had dead named the trans male character, and that is pretty offensive. And Stephanie did apologize for that. She, you know, showed that she had learned better and that she was going to edit that and it would not be in the final finished copy. However, it was in my finished copy, which is a first printing, both in my first edition finished copy and my partial ARC. It was on pages 11 and 83. I'm just pointing this out to you in case you were really counting on that being changed. If you need it to be changed, then definitely wait for a future version of the book to come out. I hope that it will be fixed in the future. I'm going to give her the benefit of the doubt that it will be changed, and I don't want to really hold that against the book or my rating. As for the story and the characters and stuff like that, like I said, it was what I thought it was going to be, so I enjoyed it. Next, my favorite new to me book that I read this month was Before the Devil Breaks You by Libba Bray. This is the third book in the Diviners series. I think that there are going to be 4 books total, so it's not over yet. This is a series following different characters who have supernatural abilities, and so they are called Diviners. The series is set in 1920s New York. So in the first book, it was very much a murder mystery where they were trying to figure out what was causing the string of murders that were happening. And then the second book is following the outbreak of a sickness, and then the third book is more following the group of characters as they are, you know, coming together and trying to uncover more about their abilities. The diversity in this book, in this series, is incredible. My favorite things about this third book in the series was really just seeing this group of characters like all be together. They're an amazing friend group in my opinion. I really love this series. I would definitely recommend it if you're looking for a lot of different relationships that you can kind of root for or ship, a lot of good friendships. Evie is like really growing as a character to me. Sam is growing as a character to me. Some things have happened with other characters that have made me completely flip my opinions. Like one of my favorite characters I now hate. One of my least favorite characters I'm now like, oh. It was an emotional roller coaster for me, and this series definitely has some vibes that were giving me similarities to like a mashup of Scooby-Doo, Stranger Things, and Ghostbusters. As for the spooky level, the first book, I remember being so creeped out by the first book in certain scenes, and I think that the first book definitely has a much more occult feel to it. But once that mystery is over, it's lighter than that with books 2 and 3. I absolutely love it. If you're gonna read this series, I highly recommend it on audio, and I will definitely be talking about this audiobook more in an upcoming audio review video. The last book that I read this month that I only want to talk about briefly because it was a reread for me, it is Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire by J.K. Rowling. I've mentioned in my last few wrap-ups that I am rereading this series via listening to the audiobooks, and my thoughts on this book have actually changed. It's been like 7 or 8 years since I last read this book. I had a picture in my mind of the movie of Goblet of Fire, which is much more prevalent in my mind than the actual book, even though I knew that there were big differences or whatever. And to me, I've always considered Goblet of Fire to be my second to least favorite book in the series, because to me I was like, oh, it's too different. It doesn't focus enough on their school year. It's so much about, you know, the games and the Triwizard Tournament and whatever. But reading this book, I was like, what was I thinking? This is an incredible book. I love this. It's like jumped up from being one of my least favorites to being one of my favorites. More of a favorite than Prisoner of Azkaban was, which I always considered that one to be my favorite in the series because it was just the first one that I read, so it had a great sentimental value. But guys, I just read those 2 books back to back, and I definitely enjoyed Goblet of Fire more. The big events are starting to be laid down in this one, so I was just really fascinated that I could have such a change of opinion on it. I loved it. So those are the things that I read in November. Let me know what you guys read this month and what your favorite read of the month was. Happy reading in December. I hope you all have good holidays, and thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the comments. Bye!